Hello, my name is Marcus. I'm the compiler of a collection of therapy quotes entitled Psychoanalytic Self-Awareness Quotes. This is TQ 273. Therapy quote number 273. What the mother had once failed to find in her mother, she was able to find in her child. Someone at her disposal who could be an echo and could be controlled, who was completely centered on her, would never desert her, and offered her full attention and admiration. If the child's demands became too great, as those of her own mother once did, she was no longer so defenseless. She could refuse to allow herself to be tyrannized. She could bring the child up in such a way that he neither cried nor disturbed her. At last, she could make sure that she received consideration, care, and respect. So this is sort of on the far end of the spectrum. So we can call this an example of the Jocasta style of mothering, where the mother uses the child to meet her needs. Remember the self-help quote? The parent is there to meet the needs of the child, not the other way around. If it is the other way around, like it is here, we can call this the Jocasta style parenting, or we simply call it childhood parentification, turning the child into a parent. So the mother's converting the child or training the child to be the parent to her. So the mother, when she was a child, didn't get consideration, care, respect. She wasn't seen, she wasn't admired, she wasn't loved. So she's using her power over her child to train the child to give her those things. She wants the child to mirror her, to see her, to be centered on her, to never leave her, never desert her, to admire her, to think she's great, and so on. Right? So, it's not meant to blame the mother. She might be doing this unconsciously. Maybe she also didn't get an insecure attachment. She got an insecure attachment style. So when she has a child, there's a trauma. When you have an insecure attachment style, that's a developmental trauma, and the tendency is to want to master the trauma. So it's called repetition compulsion. So here she's acting out on the child to try to heal from that trauma. She doesn't really heal from it, and the child, of course, suffers. So the mother may have had her existential dilemma. She didn't get a secure attachment style. There may have been trauma on her end. She may have received certain traumata or traumas. She may have had prenatal trauma or birth trauma, school shock. Who knows what she went through. She was caught in her existential dilemma, and there's a lot of psychic pain in that. So when she gets the child, there's that repetition compulsion. She's tempted to, maybe she can. So what she's doing is she's rationalizing. She's going to use the defense mechanism of rationalization, because the presence of her child might even trigger memories of what she went through. Now there's the repetition. Now she's reminded of it. It's come up. So now she's going to master the trauma. So she'll use rationalization to justify what she's doing to the child. She might say, I gave the child life, a mother's rights, like yesterday's video, or 2 days ago, the video. The mother said, it's my right, mother's rights or something. That was in the movie Voyager, now Voyager, about, was it yesterday or, no, I think it was 2 days ago. There was a video on the movie Now Voyager, and that woman was a Jocasta mother, right? So, it exists, that's why the myth is there, there's the character called Jocasta to address this dilemma. Now in the myth, the images represent the fusion between the image of the self and the image of the other, right? So there's that symbiosis there. So once more, what the mother had once failed to find in her mother, she was able to find in her child. Someone at her disposal who could be an echo and could be controlled, who was completely centered on her, would never desert her, and offered her full attention and admiration. If the child's demands became too great, as those of her own mother once did, she was no longer so defenseless. She could refuse to allow herself to be tyrannized. See, that right there, I mean, that comment right there is really something. The mother is actually projecting her rejecting mother onto the baby. For her to think that, I mean, for her to have that thought that the baby's going to impinge upon her, you see, to have that thought, she's projecting the rejecting mother onto her. See, there's her developmental trauma, and the child's presence triggered her memories, and now she's going to project rejecting mother onto her, and now master the trauma to manage the mother. So if this mother as a child couldn't get her needs met from her mother, now she's reminded of all this and she wants to repeat the scenario. This time she's going to get her needs met from her mother. So she's projecting her mother onto the child. You see, she's trying to undo the trauma. She's trying to redo it. It doesn't work, but that's the theory. She's trying to do it. Some authors say that the mother's so demanding in this effort, and the child does manage to provide perfect mirroring to the mother, and the mother hallucinates. The mother uses the child as a secure base, as an attachment figure. So the child becomes the good mother to this wounded mother. And the theory is some mothers actually then are able to feel that they got their needs met somehow. But in general it doesn't work. But that's what mothers are attempting to do. And mothers maybe feel a lot of gratification to have this child at her beck and call, because this woman's mother was never around. She was absent. So in her mind, she fantasizes the child as her mother, and she's getting gratification that way. That's passing the trauma down to the child. That child ends up with a narcissistic pattern. At the very least, if it's a case like this, she could bring up the child up in such a way that he neither cried nor disturbed her. Because when she was a child, the mother disturbed her, so she doesn't want her new mother to disturb her. At last, that song, At last, she could make sure that she gave the respect, care, and consideration from somebody. See, it's really, see, this is why, here's the irony of it all. This child that grows up, he's going to worship his mother. Because the more rejecting the mother is, the more they're bonded to them. See, he's going to split off and deny his ambivalence. This child, the victim here, when he grows up, he's likely going to idealize his mother, because either he is her, he identified with her, or he just fantasizes that to feel that he has an attachment, because you have to attach. The child needs to bond, so he'll bond with the fantasy of this refusing mother as being a good mother, and he'll split off, disassociate, deny the truth of this quote. This child will deny it all, and he'll say he had a happy childhood. See, there's the splitting. This would be an example of a severe split inside, and splitting precludes mourning, and splitting precludes whole object relations, mutual love, genuine love. Splitting precludes finding the real self and the capacities of the real self. So this child will unless she gets treatment or he gets treatment, will probably end up with the narcissistic pattern. Unless he can read Alice Miller and start to question. Alice Miller is very hard to read. She's very hard to read. I mean, emotionally hard. Language is fine, but emotionally, it's hard to read her material. Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll just leave it here. So once more, because it's such an important topic, the truth, remember what the comedian said? The truth will upset you free. So this is an upsetting quote, I realize. All of Miller's quotes are upsetting. I think anytime you quote Alice Miller, it's going to be upsetting. So yeah, okay, so we'll just do this one more time. What the mother had once failed to find in her mother, she was able to find in her child, someone at her disposal who could be an echo and could be controlled, who was completely centered on her, would never desert her, and offered her full attention and admiration. If the child's demands became too great, as those of her own mother once did, she was no longer so defenseless. She could refuse to allow herself to be tyrannized. She could bring the child up in such a way that he neither cried nor disturbed her. At last, she could make sure that she received consideration, care, and respect. You know, Rinsley has a comment that this mother may encourage the child's intellectual development on the condition the child stays psychically enmeshed with her. So this child could end up having a PhD or whatever, on the condition she'll support his cognitive development, on the condition that psychically, emotionally, he's fused with her. You see, so there's yet another split. A person can be a scientist, but psychically is a traumatized baby. I mean, psychically, I'm talking about psychically, deep within. Yeah, and you know, children from Jocasta mothers, sometimes they become puers, the mama's boys, and like Peter Pan, they're gonna fly around, and they're constantly trying to escape. See, they project mother onto the world, and they're constantly trying to escape everything and everybody. So they're always running around. That's the puer, the Peter Pan, right, syndrome. Or in a more aggressive case, they could be like this is the Peer Gynt, and the Don Juan comes from this. In literature, anytime there's this overbearing, over-dominating mother, you see the child being dysfunctional, doing, in some form or another, he's the form of his dysfunction, it can take many forms, right? Sitcoms are always making fun of the mama's boy, the dragon mother, right? And the child who's still tied to her apron springs psychically. A lot of sitcoms have this, right? WKRP in Cincinnati. Remember the manager of the radio station? He was always terrified of his mother, right? Even though he's the manager of a station and he's the boss. But when his mother walked into the room, he shook like a leaf, you know. Yeah, and there were other shows like that. Okay, so I guess I'll just leave it here. So thank you very much. This has been TQ273. More to follow. Thank you.